Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something that really moves companies beyond just, looking at their cloud bill and into actually mastering their cloud finances.
Exactly. We're talking about the FinOps assessment.
The FinOps assessment.
Mhm.
And this is so important because, most organizations are way past the discovery phase. They know they're spending money on the cloud. The real question now is how to get repeatable, measurable value out of that spend.
And the assessment is basically the blueprint for that. It's the whole journey to maturity laid out.
Absolutely. So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the mechanics of it. It's all about conducting this repeatable, measurable, and pretty thoughtful analysis of how mature a company's FinOps practice is.
All within the context of the big FinOps framework, of course.
Yeah. And the goal is to pull out these specific insights where you're doing well, and maybe more importantly, where you really need to focus your energy and your money.
And for you listening, this is so critical because an assessment gives you that objective benchmark. It's not just some audit to make you feel bad. It's a strategic tool.
A strategic tool, how so?
Well, it defines where you are right now, your current state. Then it helps you set a goal state that, and this is key, have to align with your bigger company goals, like profitability or getting to market faster.
And then it gives you the path to get from here to there.
Exactly. It's the path to maximizing your cloud value. Without that objective look, you're really just flying blind, just tracking costs in a spreadsheet somewhere.
Okay, let's unpack that process then. The sources are pretty clear that this is not some chaotic one-off thing. It's a very structured, organized loop with three main steps.
Yeah, and the first step is probably the most important. Define assessment goals. You just can't assess everything all at once. It's impossible.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means you have to understand all the different FinOps capabilities. Things like, your cloud visibility, how you manage commitments, your tagging strategy. And you have to strategically pick a few to focus on.
And you also have to pick the right people to talk to, right?
Yes, the target groups,
Mm-hmm.
or what the framework calls representative personas. You need to find people in engineering, in finance, in product, who are going to give you that valuable on-the-ground perspective.
Okay, so you've defined your scope, the who and the what. Then you move on to step two.
Which is to set the assessment baseline. This is where you get into the nitty-gritty. What's the exact process we're going to use? What tools are we going to use?
And then you do it. You perform that first assessment.
Right. You're basically documenting ground zero. This is where we are today.
And then the third step, which sounds crucial, is continuous assessment.
This is what makes it a loop. You have to set a schedule. When are we going to do this again? You look back at those goals you set in step one. Are they even relevant anymore? Have our business priorities changed?
And then you reassess as needed. The key word being continuous.
It has to be.
That organized loop, it sounds like a lot of work. If a company is already struggling to get a handle on FinOps, why wouldn't they just try to assess everything at once, just to get the whole picture?
That is a fantastic question, and it gets to a really critical point from the sources. Trying to assess the entire framework against every single person in the company.
Yeah.
It just leads to analysis paralysis.
Yeah, get bogged down.
Completely. The sources are really strong on this point. Assessments are so much more effective when you focus on a subset of capabilities and a small target group. You want deep understanding, not just broad, shallow coverage, especially when you're starting out.
That makes a ton of sense. It's better to actually fix three things than to just sort of fail to understand 20.
Precisely. And there's a key rule of thumb here. FinOps teams should always self-assess first.
Practice on yourselves.
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
They need to understand the process, fine-tune their questions, and just get a feel for the kind of conversation they're going to have internally before they go out and start interviewing, the head of engineering or the finance leads.
It's about building confidence and credibility.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't ask someone else to go through a process you haven't mastered yourself. It just doesn't work.
So this brings us to where it gets really interesting, which is the whole journey of maturity. We always hear about crawl, walk, run. And the sources show how the assessment process, its frequency, its scope, it changes dramatically as a company's cloud use gets bigger and more complex.
It's a perfect mirror of the organization itself. You can think of it like this. Crawl is like a startup in a garage. Walk is that company when it's scaling up, moving into a real office, cloud is getting serious, and run. That's the global enterprise, operating at massive scale.
The assessment has to scale with that.
It has to.
Okay, so let's start in that garage, the crawl stage.
Right. So crawl is for simple, minimal cloud use. Maybe you have one team, two teams working in the cloud. The expectation here for the assessment is pretty simple. An annual assessment focused almost entirely on the core FinOps team itself,
Just once a year.
once a year. Things are simple, so you set your goals for the next year based on what you find, you have some clear KPIs, and your documentation can be totally manual. A spreadsheet, a shared doc, it's fine. You're just trying to define what you're doing.
But then you start growing fast. You hit that walk stage. Cloud use is now widespread. It's complex. It's touching multiple departments. The annual self-assessment isn't going to cut it anymore.
No way. The cadence immediately ramps up. You jump from annual to semi-annual or quarterly assessments for the core team. But the biggest change is in the structure. You absolutely need a consistent format.
Why is that so important?
It's vital because if business unit A is measuring its efficiency one way and business unit B is doing it completely differently, how can leadership compare them? How do you decide where to invest?
So the consistent format stops teams from kind of cherry-picking the metrics that make them look good.
That's the practical reality of it, yeah. It forces an honest apples-to-apples comparison. And at this walk stage, you have to appoint a dedicated FinOps assessor on your team. They have a documented question bank to keep things consistent.
And you start looking outside the core team.
Yes, this is when you start pulling in business units or FinOps champions. But it's not on a regular schedule yet. It's more of a trial run. You're tracking goals and adjusting them after each assessment.
So the structure is getting more rigid, but the full company-wide rollout isn't there yet. Which brings us to the run stage, the global enterprise. Super complex, distributed cloud usage.
The run stage is demanding. Your core FinOps team is now doing these assessments quarterly. They're also assessing more capabilities because their processes are mature enough to handle that.
And that consistent format we talked about.
It's no longer a good idea, it's a mandate. It's absolutely required for any meaningful comparison over time.
What kind of infrastructure do you need to support something like that? Quarterly assessments distributed all over the company.
The investment is significant. You have to have multiple trained FinOps assessors. And they can't just sit in the central team. They need to be out in the business units as part of the FinOps Champions network.
Why is that? Is the workload just too high?
It's partly the workload, but it's also about context. The local champions have the business context that a central team just won't have.
Okay, so if you have dozens of assessors doing these interviews every quarter all over the world, how on earth do you keep a single source of truth? How do you not lose all that knowledge?
That is the exact problem the run stage solves. It mandates a central repository, a single place for all past assessments, all the standard discovery questions. It's your historical audit trail and your knowledge base.
And this is when the full rollout is complete.
This is it. Assessments are now being done in the business units by those champions on a regular cadence, and all the results are shared back centrally. It's a fully operational machine.
Wow. That progression really shows that FinOps isn't a budgeting exercise. It's a total shift in discipline for the whole company.
It connects cloud efficiency directly to the scale and complexity of your business.
So moving beyond the mechanics, assessments have this huge secondary goal, which is often the biggest roadblock: fostering collaboration and really trust across the organization.
Absolutely. The whole thing falls apart if you don't have open and honest dialogue. But let's be real, that's hard to get.
Why is it so hard?
Because historically, conversations about cost have been punitive, right? Engineering is afraid they'll be told to cut costs and sacrifice performance. Finance is afraid of unpredictable bills. The framework sees this friction and lays out specific commitments for everyone to try and overcome it.
Okay, let's break those down. Let's start with the FinOps practitioner. They're driving this.
Their commitment is both procedural and strategic. They have to advocate for consistent, accurate assessments. And critically, they have to take the results and use them to set real, quantifiable goals. They're the ones who have to turn the insights into an action plan.
Now for the tricky parts. Product, finance, procurement, engineering. The sources say they all share this core commitment to honest dialogue.
They do. They all have to commit to bringing that open and honest dialogue to the table. They have to be willing to talk freely about where they have gaps in knowledge or where their processes are failing for a specific capability. And they have to encourage their own business units to do the same.
So it's a commitment to be transparent, even if it shows a weakness. But how does that learning actually change what they do day to day?
It's tailored to their job. For product, it means taking what they learned from an assessment and factoring it directly into sprint planning. If an assessment shows a feature is a massive cost driver, that needs to show up in the product backlog.
And for finance and procurement?
They take those findings and build them into their long-term budgets, their forecasting models, and even their negotiation strategies with the cloud providers.
What about engineering? They're often the ones feeling the most pressure here.
For engineering, their commitment is to bring these learnings to their architectural decisions. If an assessment reveals that, I don't know, the default database setting is costing a fortune, the engineering lead commits to using that data to create a new, cost-optimized standard for everyone to use going forward. It's about codifying the learning.
And then you have leadership overseeing all of this.
Leadership is the enabler. Their commitment is what makes it all work. First, they have to set clear business goals so FinOps knows what to aim for. Second, they have to give the team the prioritization and resources to actually do the work.
We have to fund it.
They have to fund it and give them the time. And third, they have to actively encourage the business units to participate. They create that culture of transparency and accountability from the very top.
So it sounds like the real measure of maturity isn't just a number on a spreadsheet, but the level of trust that leadership builds.
100%. If people don't feel safe giving honest feedback in an assessment, the results you get are basically worthless.
Okay, so let's pivot to measuring success. We know there are KPIs for specific capabilities, like, say, reducing waste. But how do you measure the success of the assessment program itself?
You have to look at metrics that show adoption and scope. These KPIs tell you if you have real organizational buy-in. For example, you measure the number of FinOps assessments completed per year. You might even break that down by capability.
That tracks your frequency, which maps back to crawl, walk, run. What about how far it's reached?
For that, you track the percentage of business units assessed. That's a really powerful metric. It shows you if FinOps is actually broken out of the central team and into the rest of the business. If you think you're in the run stage, but only 20% of your business units are being assessed, you have a big problem.
That metric is really a direct test of that leadership commitment we just talked about.
It is. You also look at the percentage of the FinOps framework assessed, which shows your scope. And finally, a very human metric, the number of employees trained in completing FinOps assessments. This shows how much the organization is really investing in building this capability.
That's a really clear set of metrics. I should also mention, the sources point out that you can benchmark yourself against industry data from the State of FinOps data report, so you can see how you're doing compared to everyone else.
A super important step.
Yeah.
And for anyone listening who needs to put this into practice, the key documents are the FinOps Framework assessment tool and the assessment paper. Those are your inputs and outputs.
So wrapping this all up, what this really means for you is that the FinOps assessment is so much more than a checklist. It is the engine that drives maturity. It moves your organization from where it is now to a defined goal state.
And it all relies on quantifiable metrics, but it's fundamentally built on broad collaboration across everyone, engineering, product, finance, all the way up to leadership.
And that collaboration is the really hard part.
It's the hardest part. The success of the whole thing depends on getting that open, honest dialogue. And that kind of brings up a final important question for you to think about.
Yeah.
Let's say your assessment tool is spitting out amazing numbers. Efficiency is high, spending is optimized, everything looks great on paper. But your product, finance, and engineering teams, they still don't trust the process. They're still hesitant to share data freely.
How much maturity have you really achieved?
Exactly. The assessment doesn't just measure your cost efficiency. It holds up a mirror to the real underlying health of your company culture. And that's something to think about as you start your own journey.